Hey everybody, thanks for stopping back in at the Red Barn. I gotta say, I haven't gotten a lot done in the last couple episodes because this wiring stuff has required a bunch of brain work and a bunch of ordering and a bunch of more brain work and planning. So it's necessary, but I'll tell you right now, this one, we don't do a lot of work, but we cover a bunch of information that I need to understand and maybe you'll find it interesting. So yeah, wiring, and I hope you enjoy. Planning. I had forgotten that not every one of the wires for the ECU runs through the engine compartment. And so I just came back in here and added what I'm calling an interior loop. I'm not going to truncate those wires, but a bunch of the wires from the ECU do end up doing stuff in the interior. They either are signal inputs from other switches and things, or outputs to stuff like, you know, the heated seats or who knows what else. But anyway, I just needed to add another coming off of this harness piece. So now I'm going to start building this out. All right, getting prepped for some of the wiring stuff. And what I'm doing here is I am going to make up some twisted pair communication cable for the CAN system. And it's just any, appropriate gauge wire, and you need to twist it. And the way you do this, I've got my little electronics wiring vise. This is pretty cool. You can adjust this thing and move everything around and get it just how you like it. And so I got the wire clamped in there nice and tight so it doesn't go anyplace. And then on this end, there's a drill. And you can imagine where this is going. So we're going to go ahead and make up some twisted pair. And you got to crank this stuff real good to make sure that it doesn't come loose. And then the secret is to keep, I'm gonna reset that. The secret is to keep tension on this the whole time so that it doesn't do a bird's nest on you. And you will damage the end of the wires, so you gotta make sure you have enough. And then it's just keep a little bit of tension on it and give it the old twist-o-matic. And I've over twisted it on purpose because if I were to just let this go, it's most likely going to bird's nest up. So if you over twist it and then reverse it just a little bit till you get the appropriate lay length, the wrap that you want, and there's rules for all that. And then if I just take this out, I now have a twisted pair of communications cable for the CAN network. So that's kind of handy. You can buy this stuff, but it's easy enough to make if you've got spare wire lying around and if the colors match your color coding and all that good stuff. So there's one less thing to do. All right, as we get into this wiring stuff, some of it is interesting. I think some of it's tedious and boring. I'm going to cover certain things, but I think I'll put some of the detail stuff that you may not find that interesting. I'll stick it at the end. I'll start it here. So if you want to fast forward to that, here's an example. Remember I mentioned on the 25 amp, this is a Deutsche DT-P connector, P for power. You'll see them called DT-Ms as well, and just plain DT connectors. The P is for power, the M is for mini. It's just a little bit smaller size, carries less amperage. Anyway, so I had said that I had the AMP Super Seal back shells so I could put heat shrink boots on them. And I said, well, this one doesn't have one. It doesn't get one because it's a different kind of connector. Well, yeah, this is the one that came off of it. And if you want to watch at the end, you'll see me swap in, a bunch of detailed, boring stuff about swapping in this, which is essentially the same connector. Well, it is the same connector body, but you can see it's got a boot lip on it. So this is made specifically for a heat shrink boot to be slid over this way because until they're recovered down, they're big enough to go on. And then it shrinks down and grabs a hold of that lip right there. So I will have heat shrink boots for all the connectors on the ECU, even though they're inside the car. As I said, overkill, but no kill like overkill. And so, yeah, spare DTP connector. Anyway, there's that. Details at the end. All right, a little more technical stuff. These are this supplied with the Haltech flying lead harness knock sensors. These two are the knock sensors. And one of these, I won't chase it down. I suppose I could. One of these is the cam position sensor. One of these is the crank position sensor. And you can see they're pretty flexible, but they're kind of big. If you hold this up to a, an 18 gauge, 20 gauge wire, you can see there's, this is a 4 conductor. This is a 2 conductor. Both of these, all of these are shielded. And the shielding is essentially a metallic wrapping that prevents electrical noise from getting in and potentially disrupting the signals, and especially on crank and cam position sensors that are critical to making sure the ECU knows exactly what's going on when it's trying to run the engine. Any kind of interruption to those signals can be bad, hard to tune around, all that other kind of stuff. But I need to extend these from the ECU to the bulkhead connector. And if I show you what's going on here, you can see, pardon the mess, but this is part of the fun. These right here are those wires. And you can see that in the case of the crank and cam position sensors, I have reluctor-based sensors, and I really only need these 2 wires. I don't need the power and ground because reluctor sensors don't need that. If you were running Hall effect, you would need them. But you can see what's going on here. Because there's a power and a ground setup, they're doing a power and a ground loop back up into this mess that runs into a battery grounding cable or pin that runs to the battery ground, the big deal battery ground for the whole ECU. Anyway, I need to extend this whole mess about 2 feet, right? If I go back to, well, you remember my candy cane mock-up. And anyway, I was talking to Haltech's tech support, my new best friend Rick. Super awesome tech support, by the way. I mean, ridiculous. Like, the guy spent like an hour and a half on the phone with me explaining every answer to every question. I could not be happier with the support that Haltech is providing. And I also feel compelled to say they're not sponsoring me, meaning, and I'm not asking them to. I'm just saying, when you hear me talking about great products and great vendors, it's because I'm finding that they're great products and great vendors, not as great sponsors. I'm buying the stuff that you guys might buy. I'm using the tech support you guys might use. And I think that's value added. I'm not saying anything that's not, I'm telling you what's working for me and how it's happening. Anyway, let's look at this for a start. This is the 4-wire cable that's provided. And since I don't want to use this stuff because, I don't know, it's harder to work with maybe, and it's bigger, this is sort of what you get into when you get into motorsports sorts of things. This is a 4-wire shielded cable that is going to replace that. And it's maybe not quite half the size, but it's significantly smaller, significantly lighter. And yeah, so the other thing that you're going to hear me say is, I don't know if this is going to show up at all, but if you look at the size of the actual conductors, there's a magical thing that happens when you start working with TXL wires or TEFCell wires, and that is the size is so much smaller that you can hardly believe they sent you the right product. For example, this is an 18 gauge TXL wire. And you're never going to be able to see this, but just looking at the size of the thing compared to, I'm just going to see if I can find one. Pretty sure that's an 18 gauge non-TXL wire. And you're like, there's no way those are going to do the same job. And the answer is, yeah, they actually do. So again, lighter weight, same amperage capacity, all that good stuff. So I will be replacing some of the 18 gauge wires in here that I need to extend that simply aren't long enough for my application. I will be extending my 4 conductor crank and cam position sensors with this, and I will be extending my knock sensors. It gets even better because knock sensors are only 2 wires. So I will be going from this, and you can look at the size of the insulation on that thing. It's just, I mean, I get it, but to this, right? So again, that is about half the size. So a lot easier to work into a harness without taking up a bunch of bulk. I mean, if you look at this, that is what, like a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch, that bundle that I would have to route through my entire harness. And it's going to get replaced with, you know, 2 times that amount. So literally, it's about half the size by the time it's all over and done with. So anyway, there's your lesson about TXL or TFZL wire and standard wire. This stuff is great and it's fine. It's just if you get into the motorsport stuff, you start benefiting from lighter weight, smaller diameter, easier to route. It's a bunch more expensive, but you know, the proverbial you get what you pay for when you start playing at that level. All right, I'm nothing if not honest. I told you at the beginning we weren't going to get a lot done, but we were going to cover a bunch of stuff. So there we go. And I'm going to call it for this episode. As I said, the past couple weeks I haven't been able to get much work done because I've been trying to figure all this stuff out, and I've been talking to the Haltech guys. I've been ordering parts and pieces, but the good news is it's all here now, and I can now jump in and do the actual work of starting to snip the wires, starting to do all this stuff, and I'll cover that in detail in the next episode. It's going to be wiring for the next little while, but I think I am only a couple weeks away from having this electrical system all done, at least enough to fire the motor. So I hope you stick around and watch, and that you've enjoyed what you're seeing. As always, like, subscribe, share, and we'll talk to y'all again real soon. Everybody take care. Bye-bye. All right, as I get into this wiring stuff, some of this is really tedious. Some of it you might find interesting. I'm going to cover some things. I'm going to skip some things, and hopefully I present the right stuff. I'm going to start with rewinding to this DTP connector, the Deutsch DTP, P for power. This is the 25 amp per pin capable connector. And I mentioned that, if you remember, I was talking about the back shells that were going to go on the AMP Super Seal connectors. And I said, oh yeah, this doesn't have it. This doesn't have a back shell. Well, it kind of does, and I ordered one. And really, all it is, it's just a different plug. You can see the difference. It's the exact same everything all the way until the back, and then it's got a lip, a boot lip, right? And so I'll be able to get a heat shrink boot, and when it shrinks down, it grabs on to that step. So I'll have a nice match set of heat shrink boots all over this thing. And yes, it's overkill, but that's the way I like to do it. So to disassemble this one, it's slightly different. You can see that there's a locking component. That's that orange piece. And these just pull out of here like that. And you can see that wedge. That wedge is what holds the little clips that hold the contacts into the body of the connector. And so now these are able to be popped out of here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop these out, release the clip, and then each of the wires, each of the conductors, and its associated terminal can be pulled out. There's that. And it's the same exact orientation. Really is the trick to get that seal back in there first. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think that seal goes in there. If I look closely, I can see, I don't know if you can see that, there's already an orange seal inside this. And because of the boot being the thing that seals it, this doesn't fit. So, lesson learned. So these just go right back in. And now you can see as they slide right into place. I don't know if you can hear them clicking, but they click right into place. Whoop, that one didn't go. There they are, all in place. And the wedge goes in to lock it. And it really makes you honest. You have to absolutely positively have those things in there. And that clicks in. And now we have heat shrink boot capable connector here. Nice thing is, I have a spare one of these now. All right, so there we go. That's done.